A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. If anyone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, give him your cloak as well. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn your back on one who wants to borrow." The Gospel of the Lord. Today we continue reading from the 5th chapter of Matthew. That chapter is sometimes called the Sermon on the Mount. It begins with Jesus' teaching of the Beatitudes, and as it were, in a continuous and single event, Jesus fleshes out what living the Beatitudes might demand of us in very particular circumstances. One of those circumstances that is mentioned by Jesus in today's Gospel is what to do when someone harms you or acts violently in your regard. He says, turn the other cheek. Really? That is something hard to do, since most of us are inclined to respond to harm or violence with equal harm or violence. And the last line of today's Gospel calls attention to those who beg from us, and Jesus urges us to give. It's all part of the Sermon on the Mount. One problem that I might have is that Jesus says, give to those who beg of you. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount, but he never specifies the amount that we should give. Does that amount matter? Well, perhaps it does, since it may well be a measure of how faithfully we live all of the values outlined in the Beatitudes. If I give to the occasional beggar just a small pittance, maybe what I can give without missing that amount at all, giving, as it were, from my surplus, and therefore also maybe just a meager portion of what I have? Am I truly giving my full self to living the Beatitudes and the moral teaching of the Gospel? Maybe the amount does matter. When I was living in Rome, there were many beggars on the street. There was a young man, a layman, by the name of Gilbert, God rest his soul, who was studying for a graduate degree in theology at the same theology school I was studying at. And he lived with us in our monastery. He was very sensitive to the poor. And one day, when he left the house, there at the doorstep of our monastery was one of the typical and well-known beggars who did what he did every day, and he begged from Gilbert. But Gilbert didn't have any money in his pocket, so he couldn't give to him. And he told me that when that happened, he vowed that the next time that the beggar asked of him, he would give the beggar everything that he had on his person that day. Well, Gilbert was supported by another layman, a doctor, who was very, very generous, kind of offering a stipend for Gilbert's daily expenses, food, rent, tuition throughout the years that he was studying in Rome. And the doctor monthly would send several $100s to Gilbert for his own upkeep and perseverance in his study of theology. Well, you can guess what happened. The following day, after Gilbert was unable to give to the beggar, he had received a check from the good doctor in Louisiana, a check that equaled $400 or $500 for the next few months of Gilbert's support, and he had cashed it at the bank and was coming home when the beggar asked him to give something. And Gilbert wanted to be faithful to his vow, so he reached in his pocket and gave him the whole bank envelope with $400 or $500 inside. The beggar was stunned, and Gilbert needed to ask himself, wow, how am I going to go on now that I have given everything to this beggar? Be careful what you promise. Haven't we all promised to live the gospel? I wonder if we really live the Sermon on the Mount in all of the ways that the Beatitudes embody our Lord's teaching, and in all of the ways that we might respond to the circumstances that Jesus includes in that Sermon on the Mount. Does the amount matter? Well, maybe, if we are only meager in our response to those who ask something of us, if we only go 1/8 of the mile and not 2 miles to those who ask us to go the first mile with them, are we being faithful? This chapter of Matthew is certainly challenging. Maybe as we meditate on it year after year, or at other times as we read the gospel, maybe we can pray about the amount, not necessarily a monetary amount, but the amount of self that we are willing to give to those who ask of us, and pray that God gives us the grace of a superabundant generosity in the gift that we will make, maybe as soon as tomorrow. God bless you.